They thought it was just another departure, Camilla and her son. Another quiet royal flight, logged under a false name, with a black trunk no one was allowed to inspect. But one guard saw the weight, saw the seal, and knew it didn't belong to them. They mocked him for asking questions. They told him to stand down, but instead he followed. And what that royal guard found inside that private jet, it wasn't luggage, it wasn't memorabilia. It was Queen Elizabeth's personal regalia, her robe, her coronet, her diary, being flown out of Britain under a forged name. And the moment Prince William heard, he ordered the pilot to turn that plane around. So before we show you exactly what happened on that flight and how one guard brought the entire monarchy to a halt mid-air, hit subscribe with the bell icon turned on and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Because tonight's story isn't just about protocol, it's about power and the line between what's inherited and what's stolen. Sergeant Dominic Harland stood beneath the low overhang of Heathrow's Royal Terminal, white gloves clasped behind his back, boots planted on tarmac, still wet from the morning rain. The autumn air tasted like jet fuel and cold metal. Somewhere behind him, hydraulics hissed as another aircraft cycled through departure. But Harland wasn't watching planes. He was watching the car. A matte black Jaguar SUV rolled through the inner gates without clearance. No royal household decal, no diplomatic plates, no escort vehicle trailing behind. The driver hadn't stopped at security, hadn't presented credentials, just glided through like the rules didn't apply. And now, stepping out like he'd been expected all along, Thomas Parker Bowles adjusted his trench coat and tossed a leather carry-all over one shoulder. Two valets flanked him, except they weren't airport crew. Wrong uniforms, wrong posture, private hire. Harland's jaw tightened. Behind them, handlers emerged from a second vehicle carrying a black lacquered trunk that caught the grey morning light like polished obsidian. They moved quickly toward the waiting Gulfstream on Pad 6, the jet that had been marked on standby for 2 days with no listed passengers. But it was the trunk that made Harland's instincts flare. No clearance tag, no inventory slip, no registered transit form. He'd seen containers like that before, not often, but once, during a rotation at Windsor Vault 6, deep under the castle's east wing. The proportions, the reinforced edges, the way the handlers checked the seal 3 times before moving it. That wasn't luggage, that was archival transport. Harland stepped forward, boots clicking softly against wet pavement. "Excuse me, sir," he said, voice level but firm. "What's the manifest on that trunk?" Thomas barely glanced back. Personal property, household business. "It wasn't logged with protocol," Harland replied. "I need to verify contents." That's when Queen Camilla emerged from the second car. She wore a full ivory overcoat, cream scarf cinched tight at her throat, white gloves buttoned to the wrist. Her eyes landed on Harland like a blade finding its sheath. "Since when," she asked coolly, "does a foot soldier audit his queen?" Harland didn't flinch. "Ma'am, Crown Transport Authority requires that all unregistered items—" "Oh, spare me the handbook." She stepped closer, voice dropping to something sharp and dismissive. "This is royal family transfer. You're not customs." Thomas smirked, adjusting his cufflinks. "You want to sniff the luggage?" "Be my guest. Hope you like velvet and mothballs." The aides around them snorted quietly. Harland didn't take his eyes off the trunk. It was halfway up the loading ramp now, wheels grinding against metal grooves. One handler kept glancing back toward Camilla, nervous, checking for approval. People who had nothing to hide didn't move like that. Harland pulled the tablet from his hip holster and opened the secure override log. A few quick swipes, and he flagged the container under Category L2, Archival Suspicion, Unverified Transfer. Encryption kicked in immediately. The notation would reach Wellington Barracks within seconds, and someone upstairs would see it before the jet's wheels left the ground. He glanced once more at the ramp. The trunk had disappeared into the rear hold now, swallowed by shadow and steel. Camilla was already ascending the stairs, one gloved hand gripping the rail, her back rigid with the kind of posture that said the conversation was over. But Harland stayed where he was. Because his gut 15 years of watching royal households, logging discrepancies, standing post while privilege tried to rewrite protocol. His gut told him this wasn't over. It was just beginning. He keyed one final line into his tablet, encrypted and routed straight to Kensington Palace. Requesting visual hold. Possible unauthorized removal of Queen's legacy items. Further action imminent. Then he clipped the device shut and watched the jet door seal with a hydraulic hiss. He couldn't stop them here, but he could follow. And he already knew where they were headed. The Gulfstream's loading ramp buzzed as hydraulics locked into place. Handlers began the final sequence, moving with the practiced speed of men trained to avoid questions. The black trunk was halfway up now, wheeled by two aides in charcoal suits who hadn't made eye contact with anyone since they arrived. Harland stepped into their path. "Hold that crate." The lead handler hesitated, glanced toward the stairs. "I said, hold it." Harland wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. The steel in his tone did the work. Camilla was halfway up the ramp already, white glove gripping the handrail. She turned slowly, like a woman who'd been interrupted mid-coronation. "Sergeant, if you value your rank, I suggest you stop pretending you're head of border control." Harland stood firm. "Ma'am, there's no clearance attached to this item, as per Royal Logistics Regulation 12A. She descended 2 steps, slowly, like a queen approaching a peasant on her estate. "You're quoting code at me. I'm enforcing it." She snorted softly, the sound laced with venom. "Touch that crate, and you'll be scraping mud off cavalry boots by morning." The aides chuckled quietly. One shifted his weight, like he was deciding whether this was theatre or an actual problem. Harland didn't blink. He adjusted his footing and planted one boot beside the crate's wheel. Subtle, unmistakable. "This doesn't move without me." Thomas appeared at the top of the ramp, arms folded, expression oozing disdain. "Oh, Christ, it's him again," he muttered. "You've really become a little terrier with this, haven't you?" Harland replied evenly. "No, sir. Terriers yap. I act." Camilla's face darkened. "You are delaying a royal flight. That's obstruction." "Then I'll file it myself," Harland said, "alongside the manifest you forgot to file." She stepped off the ramp entirely now, heels clicking against the tarmac, closing the distance fast. Her perfume hit him first. Sharp, floral, expensive. The kind that announced arrival before words did. Move. Him. Now. One of the aides, beefier than the others, shoulders like a bouncer, stepped forward and laid a hand on Harland's shoulder. "You don't want to do that," Harland said without turning his head. "Or what?" the man asked, grip tightening. Harland's voice dropped to ice. "Or you'll be on the tarmac, explaining why your dental records need updating." A pause, long enough for the message to land. Then Camilla gave a flick of her wrist, and the aide backed off. She moved closer until there was barely a foot between them. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "You're playing a dangerous game, Sergeant." "I don't play, ma'am. I protect." "You think you're protecting the crown?" He stepped aside finally, just half an inch, enough to let the crate pass while still shadowing it with his presence. "I think I'm protecting what's left of its soul." She didn't reply, just turned sharply, ascended the ramp without another word, and disappeared into the fuselage. The crate followed, swallowed into the belly of the jet. The doors hissed shut. Harland stood alone on the tarmac, the red tail fin reflecting off his polished boots. He stared at the sealed aircraft and reached for his encrypted tablet again. No more warnings, no more delays. Now it was time to act. By the time Sergeant Harland reached Kensington Palace, the wind had turned bitter. His coat flared behind him as he moved past the outer cordon, badge raised, throat dry with adrenaline. Guards at the gate exchanged a glance, recognized the authorization code, and waved him through without question. He didn't ask for a briefing officer, he asked for the prince. 5 minutes later, he stood inside a discreet side office overlooking the gardens. No fanfare, no aides with clipboards, just a fire crackling in the grate, and Prince William standing with his back to the window, reviewing intelligence briefs stacked in neat piles on a mahogany desk. Harland waited. William spoke without turning. "You're the one who flagged the jet." "Yes, sir." William turned, his eyes were sharp, jaw set in a line that hadn't softened since the funeral. My stepmother doesn't usually travel without announcing it, especially not with archival containers. He paused. You saw the trunk yourself? I did. What made you stop it? Harland didn't hesitate. Proportions, weight distribution, reinforced steel plating, vault manufacture markings along the base, no clearance log, and the smell of lies in the air. William's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Almost. Any idea what's inside? Not officially, but if I had to guess, royal regalia, possibly Class A inheritance items, possibly private archival property. Harland paused. Definitely not hers. William stepped forward slowly, folding his arms. Do you believe what's in that jet doesn't belong to her? Harland's voice was calm, unflinching. I believe it belongs to your grandmother, sir. And if I'm right, it was never meant to leave British soil. Silence filled the room. Only the fire dared speak, crackling softly in the background. Then William turned toward the fireplace, reached for a locked drawer inside the polished desk, and retrieved a single folder, thick, matte black, sealed with wax. He opened it, scanned one page, then looked back at Harland. Protocol W13, he said. Special discretionary override. This gives you full authority to intervene, even mid-air. Harland didn't move. William held out the folder. You'll need it. Harland took it. The weight felt heavier than paper. William added, Air Command has already been looped in. I'll send the signal myself when the moment comes. Harland nodded once. As he turned to go, William spoke again. If it's what you think it is, don't let it leave the sky. Harland looked back. I won't. William's voice dropped to a quiet undertone. And Sergeant? Sir? You're not just protecting a box. You're protecting what the crown used to mean. Harland's reply was simple. That's why I enlisted. William nodded slowly. Then finish what you started. Harland saluted. No more words were exchanged. He walked out of the palace carrying authority that outranked titles, and something heavier than that. Responsibility. The tarmac lights along Pad 6 glowed faint orange against the approaching dusk. From the far maintenance bay, Sergeant Dominic Harland moved quickly, but without alarm, his gait practiced to blend in with the evening shift changeover. He wore no rifle, no cap, just the dark service coat, the clearance lanyard William had signed off on, and a technician's clipboard tucked under one arm. Even at this hour, engineers were still around, rechecking fluid pressure, inspecting seal integrity, running diagnostics. And that was his cover. The Gulfstream sat like a sleeping predator in the middle of the pad. Engines cycling low, navigation lights blinking red against the grey sky. Doors sealed. Final checklist being filed with air traffic control. 30 minutes until takeoff. Inside, Camilla and Thomas were already seated, unaware. Harland circled the jet once, approached the cargo hatch from a blind angle, and tapped twice on the underbelly access panel. A moment later, it hissed open from the inside. A young engineer, Callum, nodded at him from the galley ladder, face pale but steady. "You're mad," Callum whispered. "You know that, right?" "I'll take that as loyalty," Harland replied, slipping inside. "I never saw you." "You never did." He moved through the tight crew corridor, every footstep soft, every motion rehearsed. The interior lights were already dimmed for takeoff. Aides chatted near the front bulkhead. Farther down, cabin noise carried, clinking glasses, Thomas's laugh, too loud and too forced. Somewhere behind that sound sat the black trunk. Harland crouched inside a narrow utility bay between service panels. It wasn't built for hiding, but it would hold him through takeoff, just long enough. He exhaled slowly and braced himself as the engines began to rumble louder, the metal skin of the aircraft trembling with restrained power. The cabin crew sealed the doors with a hydraulic hiss that echoed through the fuselage like a vault closing. He was inside, no turning back. The jet began taxiing, rolling forward with steady rhythm. Fuel burned. Clearance was given. The runway widened in the dark beyond the nose cone. The captain's voice, low and calm, filtered through the cabin intercom with final pre-flight checks. Then thrust. The jet surged forward. Harland clenched the wall strap, jaw locked, as acceleration pressed him into the compartment wall. The entire world narrowed to vibration and noise. 5 seconds. 10. Then air. The wheels left the ground, and they were airborne. He waited 30 seconds. 60. The plane levelled at cruising altitude, and the cabin lights shifted from red to amber. Harland didn't blink. Inside his coat, beneath his left arm, the W13 folder sat in a slim case pocket, sealed in navy blue, embossed with the prince's crest. He didn't need to read it again. He already knew what it said, and more importantly, what it allowed. His pulse was steady now, controlled, focused. If I'm wrong, I lose everything. If I'm right, they lose something far worse. He straightened slowly inside the dark compartment, eyes sharp. He was in their sky now, and what happened next was up to him. The cabin lights had dimmed to soft amber. Somewhere behind a glass partition, a steward was preparing tea service on a silver tray. Camilla reclined in a high back leather seat near the rear bulkhead, her gloves folded neatly in her lap like props in a play. Across from her, Thomas Parker Bowles swirled a tumbler of scotch he hadn't earned. "It's just theatre, really," Thomas was saying. "They dress up these men like toy soldiers and pretend they run the country's defences. Half of them wouldn't survive a shopping queue without getting flustered." Camilla smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "They survive off obedience. Strip that away, and they're little more than ornamental." A faint hiss broke the conversation. A service hatch slid open at the edge of the galley. Sergeant Dominic Harland stepped into the cabin. No announcement, no weapons, no emotion. Just the folder in one hand, and the kind of silence that dragged heat from a room. Thomas froze mid-sip. Scotch sloshed against the glass. Camilla's smile vanished like frost under sunlight. "What," she said slowly, "is this?" Harland walked down the aisle with measured steps, black boots thudding gently against the inlaid carpet. He stopped 3 feet from them, unfolded the folder, and held up the embossed W13 clearance form. "By order of His Royal Highness Prince William of Wales," Harland said evenly, "this aircraft is now under active security override. All containers, crates and secured assets aboard this flight are subject to immediate inspection." Thomas blinked, set the glass down too hard. "This is a joke." Camilla stood slowly, her voice hardening like cement. "You staged a mutiny on my aircraft?" Harland didn't flinch. "No, ma'am." "You staged a theft on Crown soil. I'm just correcting course." Her hands trembled, barely perceptible. "You don't have that authority." "I do," he replied. "Signed, sealed, and airborne." Thomas stood now, his face flushed red with indignation and scotch. "You're finished. You'll be stripped out of that uniform so fast your own boots won't recognise you." Harland turned his head slightly toward him. "Then I suggest you enjoy your scotch, sir, because it's the last privilege you'll taste for a while." One of the aides at the front cabin door stepped forward uncertainly, unsure whether to intervene. Camilla shot him a glare that rooted him in place like a nail through wood. Harland's voice stayed calm. "I'm here for one thing. That trunk. If it's what I think it is, it doesn't belong to either of you." Camilla scoffed, but there was a crack in it. "Do you even know what's inside?" Harland's gaze didn't move. "That's what I'm here to find out." Thomas moved to block the aisle, chest puffed, posture borrowed from too many boardroom confrontations. "You take one more step, I'll—" Harland cut in, flat and surgical. "You'll what?" "Quote your wine column at me. Sit down." The air in the cabin went still. Even the engines seemed quieter. Camilla stepped forward, close enough that he could smell her perfume again. Sharp, artificial, cloying. "You think this makes you righteous? You think the prince will protect you once this story goes public?" Harland didn't blink. "He doesn't need to protect me. The truth will." And with that, he stepped around her, slowly, deliberately, and made his way toward the cargo hold. Every footstep echoed like a countdown. The cabin narrowed as Harland moved toward the rear hold. The hum of the engines deepened with altitude, but inside the aircraft, the air felt heavier, denser, like the moment before thunder breaks. He reached the bulkhead partition and pulled it aside. There it was, the black, lacquered trunk. Even in the dim light, it gleamed with precision. Reinforced steel corners, tamper-proof seal still intact, and there, etched into the latch plate, an archival stamp he recognized immediately. Windsor Archive Unit 7. Private access only. Beneath it, a small brass plate dulled with age. Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, personal effects. Harland crouched slowly, thumbed the seal scanner clipped to his belt, and pressed it to the lid. The device blinked once, twice. Then the lock disengaged with a soft hydraulic hiss. Behind him, Camilla and Thomas approached with reluctant steps, their footfalls hesitant, like people walking toward a truth they'd been running from for months. "Don't you dare," Camilla breathed, voice tight. "That trunk is private. You have no idea what you're about to desecrate." Harland ignored her. The lid lifted. Inside, cradled in grey foam and black velvet, were items that hadn't seen daylight since the Queen's passing. The coronation robe, hand-stitched in gold thread, still folded with surgical precision, every pleat deliberate, every seam sacred. The state sash, its maroon and blue trim, faded slightly with time, but unmistakable in its meaning. A diary, leather-bound, worn at the edges, the royal cipher embossed into the spine, ER2, gleaming faintly under the cabin lights. And finally, tucked beneath a protective silk screen, a diamond coronet. Small, elegant, heavy with history. Harland exhaled once through his nose. Thomas tried to laugh, but it came out wrong, hollow. "It's memorabilia, heirlooms, family items. You're making a scene over a dress-up box." Harland reached beneath the coronet and pulled out a folded document. Export permit. Except the signature was wrong. The authorization number didn't exist in any database he'd ever accessed. It had been printed on a recycled form, one that had already been voided 3 years ago. A forgery. He held it up between two fingers. "Curated, is it?" Harland asked coldly. "Shame you didn't curate a convincing forgery." Thomas opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Camilla stepped closer, voice low and vicious. "She never wore these anymore." "What difference does it make?" Harland didn't look at her. His voice was a blade. "Because she wasn't buried with permission to be stripped." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Camilla's hand twitched, the tips of her gloves trembling against her coat, but she said nothing. For the first time since boarding, she had no reply. Harland resealed the crate, the hydraulic lock clicking back into place with a sound like a closing vault door. He stood slowly, placed the forged document into an evidence sleeve, and clipped it to his chest. Then he turned and looked directly at Camilla. "The difference, ma'am, is that legacy isn't inherited like property. It's protected. And right now, he was the only one protecting it." Harland stepped back into the main cabin with the trunk now sealed, the forged document clipped to his chest, and silence trailing behind him like a storm front moving through. Thomas had sat down again, barely, one leg bouncing nervously, the tumbler of scotch abandoned on the fold-out tray, ice melting into amber liquid. Camilla remained standing, rigid as marble, white gloves curled into fists. "I'll have your commission revoked by morning," she said, voice shaking with something between rage and panic. "They'll drag your career through every gutter in London before they let you into a palace again." Harland didn't look at her. He tapped his comm device, connected through to the cockpit. "This is Sergeant Harland," he said. "Protocol W13 authorization confirmed. Proceeding with asset lockdown and reroute order. Request immediate return to UK airspace under Royal Directive." There was a long pause on the line, static breathing. Then the pilot replied, voice strained, "Sir, we have the Queen Consort aboard. Diverting without her consent requires double verification." Harland's reply was clipped. "Copy, verification en route." He opened the encrypted folder again, typed one line, Sent. The response took 27 seconds. The cockpit comm crackled, and then, "Captain, this is Prince William. You are hereby ordered to initiate a controlled return to Heathrow. Confirm now." Camilla's head whipped around. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out except a strangled breath. The pilot stammered, Yes, sir. Turning now." The engines groaned as the plane banked hard left, the sudden shift pressing everyone sideways. Glasses rattled in their holders. Thomas cursed under his breath as his Scotch glass slid off the tray and hit the carpet with a dull thud. Camilla grabbed the nearest seat back, knuckles white beneath the gloves. Her voice rose now, cracking at the edges. "You think this will crown you, Sergeant? It will break you." Harland didn't move. "I'm not here to wear it," he said flatly. "I'm here to protect it." Thomas stood again, shaking now, coat hanging crooked from his shoulders. This is madness. It was just meant to be kept safe. Mementos, personal items. Harland turned toward him slowly. Then why forge the paperwork? No answer, just breathing, heavy, ragged. Camilla's voice dropped to a snarl, low and venomous. "We don't answer to ceremonial ornaments." Harland stepped forward, his words soft but final. "You're confusing silence with obedience. That's your mistake." She stared at him, fury etched in every line of her face, but behind the anger, something deeper had crept in, fear. Because the jet was already descending, nose dipping toward the cloud layer below, and her power didn't fly at this altitude anymore. It was falling, fast. The jet touched down hard. Tires shrieked across the runway as the Gulfstream's nose dipped and stabilized, reverse thrusters roaring like something being torn back to earth. The cabin jolted. Harland didn't flinch. Camilla stumbled, but caught herself on the leather armrest, hair falling loose from its pins. Thomas cursed aloud, scrambling to close his jacket, like appearance could salvage reality. They weren't returning to the private hangar. They were being directed to an isolated security tarmac, Heathrow Pad 9, a location normally reserved for military extraditions or diplomatic emergencies. As the plane rolled to a halt, the cabin crew looked pale. No one moved. No one spoke. Outside the window, a small convoy sat waiting. MOD transport. 2 unmarked Range Rovers. A grey archival van with tinted windows. Behind them, flanked by armed security personnel in black field uniforms. Prince William. He stood still, hands behind his back, not flanked by aides or photographers. Just one man, and he was watching. The jet door cracked open. Hydraulic steps hissed downward. Cold wind rushed in, scattering papers and Camilla's perfectly styled hair. She stormed to the threshold, like she was descending a throne, heels clicking sharply against metal steps. The moment her foot hit the tarmac, her voice shot out. "He invaded my plane. He violated the monarchy. This is sedition, William." Harland descended next, calm, carrying the trunk like a casket of royal memory. His steps were silent against the stone. William didn't raise his voice, didn't even blink. "No, Camilla," he said quietly. "You violated her memory." Camilla's mouth opened, but the words faltered, died in her throat. Thomas joined them, smoothing his coat like image could salvage reality. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "It was a preservation effort. None of it was official." Harland turned, knelt by the archival van and unsealed the trunk. He lifted the lid, not for drama, but for record. William stepped forward and looked inside. His face didn't change, but his breath caught, just slightly. He reached in slowly and pulled out the coronet, turning it in his hands like something sacred. Then the diary, still sealed in its velvet case, the royal cipher catching the light. Camilla stepped forward quickly, voice shifting to something softer. Desperate. "Those were going to be displayed," she said, "as tribute, not stolen, not hidden. I was going to give her the legacy she deserved." William cut her off without looking at her. "None of this," he said quietly, "was yours to take." Camilla froze. A flash of cameras went off in the distance, long lenses peeking through the security fence, catching glimpses of something they weren't supposed to see. It was already too late. Thomas glanced between them, panicked. "You're making a scene out of a family misunderstanding." Harland finally spoke again, voice like stone. "Funny." That's what she said when the regalia disappeared. No one replied. Camilla turned away, one hand gripping the edge of her coat, as if she could still hold something together by clutching fabric tighter. But it was already unravelling. The guards closed the trunk and sealed it for evidence transport. The coronet, the robe, the diary, all of it. Legacy secured. And the woman who tried to steal it? Left standing in a spotlight she no longer controlled. The wind picked up as the guards sealed the archival van and signalled for departure. No ceremony, no trumpets, just the sound of duty being done and a crown being defended. Camilla stood near the edge of the runway, her heels sunk slightly into the tarmac, hair wild, face unreadable. No one was listening anymore, not even Thomas. He'd gone silent too, just watching as the last vestige of control was loaded into a box he'd never touch again. Sergeant Dominic Harland remained still beside the transport. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just stood his post. Prince William stepped forward, his coat rippling in the wind, and looked once at Harland. No salute, no handshake, just a nod. A silent acknowledgement between soldier and sovereign. The crate rolled away, and with it, a truth that was never meant to leave the Queen's side, finally returning home. Should a royal guard have the right to override private transport if it protects the late Queen's legacy? Was Prince William right to call the plane down mid-air, or should this have been handled quietly, behind the scenes? And if that regalia had vanished forever, who would have stopped it? If you believe some things should never be taken, no matter the title, hit that like button right now to show your support for duty over privilege. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on so you never miss what really happens behind palace gates. Share this video with someone who still believes legacy has a line that should never be crossed. And don't go far, our next story is already waiting on your screen. Click to watch it now, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time with a brand new video.